Kind of like if you got a bag of dark roast coffee and poured petrol on it and set fire to it. Welcome back, Dram fans. These two look familiar, don't they? And finally, I say finally, it's not been that long. Unless I release this in 2025, in which case apologies. I'm reviewing the two good value whiskies that really impressed me from the Whisky Advent Calendar that I did at the end of 2023. So the first one I'm going to be looking at is the Smoky Scot. So this is an ACO product, and we know that it's a Caol Ila. I'll give you a close-up of the tube. I like the presentation on this one, quite modern but also kind of no nonsense. Smoky Scot Ila single malt whiskey, and at the bottom it tells you, I actually thought this might, when I was tasting it blind, I thought it might be a Stoischer, a Peated Bunnahabhain. It is not. It's a Caol Ila, and it's a 5-year-old Caol Ila, and I like it quite a lot. I think it's excellent value, excellent quality, and like I've said before, it just goes to show that Diageo distilleries they can and do regularly make really good whiskey. It's just that the bean counters and the pen pushers at Diageo ruin it with colouring and chill filtration and bloody high prices. This one though, because Caol Ila is such a workhorse of the Scotch industry, it was created or reconstructed, I think in the 1970s, as a blend filler distillery, pumping out those heavily peated, kind of textbook smoky Islay malts to put into Diageo blends. This stuff obviously escaped being put into a blended Scotch, because we have it to enjoy here as a full single malt. So the specs on this one doesn't actually guarantee natural colour. Why they've chosen not to tell us that that's natural colour, I have no idea, because I would almost bet money that it is. I'd be very surprised if they've coloured that to that pale straw colour. But you never know. What they do guarantee is that it's non-chill filtered. On the back of the tube and the back of the label it says non-chill filtered for maximum flavour. We like that, don't we? It's interesting to note that the Smoky Scot, and this doesn't really matter because they're both very affordable whiskies, but with this one it tells you that it's non-chill filtered, and with this, but not natural colour. This one, it tells you that it's natural colour, but it doesn't tell you that it's non-chill filtered. And that's possibly not a coincidence, because I think with this one they are very much marketing it at the peat heads, and I'm sure there's a fair few of you peat heads out there watching this review, myself counted. So with this one they kind of want you to know that it's full flavoured, and they see non-chill filtration as a good way of marketing that. Whereas perhaps this one, they don't tell us that it's non-chill filtered, and maybe it's not, because it is very clear despite being quite dark, but they tell us that it's natural colour. So perhaps with this one they're thinking that it's more of a selling point that this beautiful dark colour is natural. Who knows? Just a little bit of conjecture there that I thought was interesting, kind of looking into the psychology of a whiskey marketer. That's a scary thing. Anyway, Smoky Scot, which is a 5-year-old Caol Ila, the workhorse of Islay and one of my favourite distilleries. This stuff got the second place in the Whisky Advent Calendar 2023, which is very, very impressive for a 5-year-old whisky, especially one that sells for this price. And obviously, when I was doing that Whisky Advent Calendar, I tasted everything blind, and I placed everything in the leaderboard blind. And I did kind of keep doubting myself. I kept thinking, is this 5-year-old whisky really the best whisky so far in the Advent Calendar? Is it possible that this humble little whisky really clicks with my palate that well? Is this 5-year-old Caol Ila really better than, say, a Bunnahabhain 12? Let's find out. Let's get rid of that one. beautiful colour. I'd be so surprised if that's not natural. Just look at it. You very rarely get a whisky that's paler than that. Just immediately grabs you and pulls you through a portal into Islay, nosing that. Smoky, goes without saying. Smoky, coastal, medicinal, burnt, charred, acrid, big, strong, ballsy. The beauty of having a heavily peated single malt and bottling it at a young age is that it has this degree of power and intensity that really reaches into your soul and grabs you. Smoky bacon, medicinal, bandages, iodine, wet wool. Lots of various damp things. A little bit of dimethyl sulfide, rock pools, just sea foam, that funkiness that you get on the seashore some days. I think it tends to be when the wind is blowing in off the sea. It's dead things, isn't it? It's like peat, really. Peat is dead things. Organic compounds, they like to call it, because that sounds nicer than dead things. But it is dead things that have been burnt to add flavour. Definitely smells like a low tide and everything left behind by the sea. Burnt coffee, like a burnt Italian roast coffee. Tar, oily, tarred ropes, but also with a background sweetness and a hint of pear, probably coming through from that Caol Ila malt, but very dirty and smoky and just raw. I think that it's fairly safe to say that this is a whisky that you will either love or hate this one. And I think that a lot of people will hate it, and they're not wrong, everyone's opinion is valid, but this is a whisky that you probably don't want as your first dram, because it's a real change of pace. It's really something that you could probably do with working up to. But for those that appreciate this very dirty and oily and slightly ugly side of peated whisky, it is beautiful. Let's see how it tastes. Gorgeous. Very acrid, burnt grist, burnt plastic, but also with a curious and contradictory brightness. Lots of iodine and disinfectant, hospital floor cleaner, smoky, oily peat, mineral oil, used engine oil, as well as some sweet menthol, sweet malt contrasting stunningly with that dry, burnt peatiness. And again, I'm getting a note of burnt French roast coffee, like a very, very dark roast coffee. Kind of like if you got a bag of French dark roast coffee and poured petrol on it and set fire to it. And interestingly, that kind of dark roast coffee note, it kind of reminds me, and it's not coincidence, of some of the notes that I got from Ardbeg Hardcore. And that wasn't a whisky that I loved at all. That was really the turning point for me. I think when I paid, I think it was about £100 for the Ardbeg Hardcore, and it just had that very narrow, charred, clinical profile. Just didn't have a lot going on for £100. This stuff kind of has a similar burnt quality to it, in particular that burnt coffee note, but it's a much better whisky than Ardbeg Hardcore for about a third of the price. Gonna have one more sip and look at the finish. I think medium length, maybe medium long if I'm being generous. It's not an enormously long finish, but that probably aligns with the young age of this whisky. But the majority of the flavours die off after perhaps a medium long length of time. And the flavours on the finish are really smoky and burnt and that medicinal gristiness. It's like someone's got a pile a pile of grist and covered it in bandages and plasters and set fire to it. Yeah. And it sounds disgusting to anyone that's not into heavily peated, proper extreme Islay whiskey, because it is. But us peat heads, we appreciate these things. You know what I mean. I think if you're into those heavily peated, raw and slightly ugly peat notes, I think you'll love this. It's probably not for the faint of heart, but it's incredibly good, and I think that this stuff, if you are into your extreme peat, is the perfect winter dram. No regrets at all putting this at number 2 on the Advent Calendar leaderboard. I know that it's going to be a divisive one, a lot of people will disagree, and that's fine. That's what tasting is all about. It's all subjective, and it's all personal. And to be fair, this stuff, it doesn't have the finesse of some of the others on that leaderboard, but I really enjoy it a lot, and a lot more than some of the others, with the exception, sadly, of that party pooper that turned up at the end, the Speyburn 18. And this stuff was really robbed, because it came second place to a whiskey that sells for more than twice the price, which in itself, the Speyburn 18 is a fantastic value dram. It really, really is. But this humble little 5-year-old Islay whiskey, it did so well to come in second, and it was just pipped at the post. Just to give you an idea of the intensity and the forceful nature of this whiskey, I actually had a curry about an hour after tasting this and writing my notes to prepare for this review, and to start with, the flavours from this actually overpowered the flavours of the curry. I think that the real question though is not this compared to the rest of the Whisky Advent leaderboard, it's this compared to something like a Lechig 10. I think that that would be a really tough battle, although honestly with this being more raw and less burdened by the cask, which is obviously an acquired taste, I think that it would be a very close battle, probably too close to call. And I think that that really is the key with this one. It's a peated whiskey that's not been burdened with excessive age or excessive cask influence, much in the same way as the Kilchoman 100% Islay has the peat toned down, and it allows that homegrown barley to really shine through. With this one, because you've got less active wood and only 5 years of maturation, it really allows that peat to shine through, and it really bloody does, like a floodlight. I'd say that this is in a similar league to like an Ardbeg 10. Another thing that this really reminds me of, like the peated black bottles, like the Peated Alchemy series black bottles that it wasn't that recently, but we reviewed a little while ago, like the Black Bottle Island Smoke, which actually makes me wonder if the peated whiskey that goes into the Black Bottle Island Smoke really is Bunnahabhain, or perhaps it is Caol Ila that they've got at a good price. I think it's also quite similar to Smokehead, which, until they trashed it and reduced the ABV to 40%, was a really firm favourite of mine, and one that I've always suspected might be Caol Ila. But honestly, this stuff, because it has got that much less cask influence, it just has more peat and less cask, and is probably a better whiskey. I think that for this style of whiskey, where it's all about that peatiness, where it's all young and raw peat, I think that this stuff is absolutely without flaw, and more impressively than that the actual malt that they put into this, it stands up to that extreme heavy peat. It's actually very impressive that the malt is noticeable at all above the peat that you get in this. I think that this whiskey, this Smoky Scot 5-year-old, it's a style that if you appreciate it, then you'll love it. Me personally, I'll be buying a backup. So let me know what you think about this one if you've been lucky enough to have it. As I said before, I do think this one will be a little bit divisive. I think it's going to be a little bit of a Marmite malt. Some people, hopefully not from my reviews, because I've been very clear about the fact that this is a bit of an acquired taste, but I think that some people will buy this and just go, ugh, because it's something that you really need to be into. But hopefully a lot of you peat heads out there have bought this and enjoyed it as much as I have, because I really am. Thanks for watching. Next week I think we will go for the other one out of the Whisky Advent Calendar. It's going to be which I think this is also an ACO product. Yeah, it is. It's the Murray McDavid Tullibardine Sherry Finish Coscraft. So join me next week when we'll be looking at this. Thanks for joining me as always. This channel is a labour of love myself, and I put in a hell of a lot of work to get these reviews out, hopefully every week, but it's really you guys that make the community. Thank you all for watching and commenting. I'll see you next time. Cheers.